Julia Salata. Julia, thank you so much for being on Throwing the Brick.
Awesome. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me on.
I'm really excited because I know when Wrestling Shirt a Day in May comes around now, like I'm strategic with my shirts. Like I've got enough to probably get me through, especially if I just go through like my Princeton gear, but I don't want to support my husband too much because then like his head explodes. So I was like, when am I going to wear the Wrestle Like a Girl shirt? And then I was like, oh my God, when I talked to Julia, that makes so much
Perfect
sense.
day.
Yeah.
Perfect day. Yeah. I actually had one on. I had a wrestling girl shot on today, actually, and I took a shower and just changed. So we could have coordinated if I would have been thinking about it a little bit further ahead. But I love the shirt. It's a good one. Soft one too. That one that you have on, super soft.
These are so soft. And we lucked out. Sally was doing like a clinic, like a free clinic in Trenton, in Jersey when we went, and my daughter was 4, and my daughter got interviewed on the news and like had no clue what she was talking about. She ended up like sitting on Sally's shoulders half of the time during the clinic. It was in like a church. It was but Sally was a good sport. And we got the shirts and they are so soft. You're right. They are awesome. Okay. I don't even know where to begin because you have this multifaceted career that's taking you into coaching. So let's start with, you are a King alum. And can we start there with your experience?
Yeah. So obviously I wrestled at King all 4 years of my collegiate career. Upon graduating, I moved to the Olympic Training Center for a year during the 2016 Olympic year. And at the conclusion of that year, I decided I wanted to keep training, but I didn't want to be at the OTC anymore. So I talked to Coach Mormon, who's the head coach at King. He started the program back in 2009. And I said, hey, I just want to come back and train. If I can be a volunteer assistant and help out, I'm willing to do that as well.
Yeah.
And it just so happened that right as I was making that move, he was all about it, all, supported it. Right as I was making that move, the actual assistant coaching position actually opened up. And I was like, I'm kind of interested. Like, again, I still want to train. I've always thought about coaching as kind of a way to continue competing. And it kind of worked out. The Coach Mormon actually offered me the job officially while we were still sitting in the stands in Rio, watching Haley Agello compete. So at the time it was like, well, cool. It's kind of worked out. I can like pay my bills and still train. So this will be good. It'll be good. But even at that time, I never really saw it as like a long-term career. It kind of seemed like a very short-term move while I was still competing. But after about a year or two, I was like, oh wait, this is actually kind of fun. I started coaching it, I saw myself as an athlete first and a coach second. And I think probably between my second and third year, I started to kind of flip those roles a little bit in my head. I was a coach first and an athlete second. And I started noticing the times where I was having the most fun in the sport were the times where I was in the corner coaching. And the moments where I was having the most fun and having the most elation were those big wins when I was in the corner, not even my own big wins.
Yeah.
I won a US Open as an assistant coach, and I was like, yeah, sick. And then in the corner, one of my kids won a national title, and I'm like freaking out. I'm like, this is the coolest thing ever.
Yeah.
Like I kind of noticed myself having that mentality shift like around end of my second year, beginning of my third year. Now I'm just finishing up my 5th year as a full-time assistant coach, and I'm just so invested. It really has turned into a career path for me. I mean, it's no longer just me, a means to an end for my competition career. It's the career that I want to choose and go into. I want to be a head coach. I want my own program. And there's just such a need for female coaches right now. And I think, when I was my first year as an assistant coach, I think I was one of like 4 or 5 female coaches in the WCWA. And that's not the case anymore, which is so awesome to see. There's so many female coaches, but we still need more. So I think that's kind of where it's like, yes, I'm a coach and this is my role and this is what I love doing. But now I'm also trying to be that advocate and trying to get more girls vested in coaching and not having to go through the same thing I did, where it was kind of like, well, I guess I'll coach and try it out and see what happens. Now it is more of like, girls need to realize that this can be a career for them, that they can do this long-term and they can aspire to be that. So I think that's kind of how I arrived at this point. And I'm excited to see where I kind of go from here.
How do you feel? Did you think that the becoming such a technician as a coach, do you think that has played a role in you becoming an even better athlete?
Oh, 100%, without a doubt. And I think especially too, because not just me, but any wrestler, you have a style, right? Everyone knows that I shoot low singles and I shoot arm drag doubles. You don't need to watch film on me anymore. Everyone knows, I've been around a long time now. And because of that, I would try other things. Obviously, you're always, having that growth mindset. You always want to expand your, technique options and all that. But being a coach kind of forced me to actually have to analyze other styles.
Yeah.
The majority of my team does not wrestle like me. And when we're doing one-on-ones or we're in practice, I have to be able to coach all of those styles. And I think one of the biggest things that we're all about at King is that we don't teach a style at King. I mean, we have some drills and things that are, like foundations of our program, but we don't come in and we say, well, we're a 2-on-1 team or we're a double leg team. It's like, come in with the skills that you have and how can we expand on it? How can we build your toolbox? But we're not changing your toolbox. We're just building on what you know.
Right.
And so I kind of had to adapt that mentality as well as a coach of like, how can I best help you? And also force myself to learn. So maybe it is like watching technique videos and watching a bunch of film on Russian wrestlers and other people that have styles that I don't. And I even like, I'll work with some of these girls and I'll like point something out to them. And when I'm watching them do it, it makes so much sense. Like, of course you need to step here and move this hand here. And then I'm like, well, I don't do that when I drill. I should probably fix that. And I'm kind of like trial by error through coaching them, fixing my own wrestling as well.
Yeah.
So it's really forced me to kind of get uncomfortable with other styles and other techniques. And also forced me to kind of have to look in the mirror and be like, what am I doing wrong? I can be critical of them all day, but if I'm not exhibiting those same things, like it's like there's a couple of situations, like there's a couple of drills where like, you can kind of take some shortcuts and I'll call them out on it. And I'm like, wait, I did that in college. So I should probably fix it myself. So when especially when I'm training with them in practice, like I kind of had to set the pace in the room. I can't let them beat me in a sprint. I can't let them get more reps than me. Like I kind of, it forces me to have to step up in a way that I didn't as an athlete, and not that I was ever in the middle of the pack as an athlete, I was without being, having too big of a head. I was a pretty good college athlete, but I never felt like I had to lead the room. If I was allowed to have an off day in college, I was in the room with Allie Reagan and Haley Ugello and Sarah Oderbrandt, like any given day, someone was leading the pack. But now I'm like, I kind of have to be the alpha a little bit, which I think was really good for me as an athlete as well, is to kind of not only for my own training, but also for them to see like, well, this is the standard, you know what I mean? They look up to me and they kind of, they're watching what I'm doing. And it forces me to hold myself accountable a bit more, not just on the mat, but in my diet, my nutrition, and how much sleep I get. So I definitely have to, step my game up, and I like that challenge for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. Let's talk a minute about I want to hone in a little on the diet and the nutrition piece of this. I think I talked about this in another interview. I competed in this, the Strobel challenge, where you try to get down to like your college weight class or your high school weight class or whatever. And I wrestled 103. That wasn't happening. But I was like, I'm going to try to just cut, as much as I can in 30 days. And my husband, who cut 20 pounds like that, was shocked to really see what it takes for a woman to be able to lose ounces, let alone a pound or two, that I could go in 2 layers of sweats, and be doing some kind of cardio, steady state cardio for 2 hours and not even lose a full pound or barely lose a pound. So talk a little bit about the nutrition piece of this and how you really support your athletes.
So I think the diet and nutrition component has really been something, again, that I've really embraced in recent years. In college, I never really ate poorly. Honestly, I've never been like a binge eater or a junk food eater. My problem was always portion control. Like I love salads, but like I would eat like 4 plates of salad, and like I loved like grilled chicken breast, but I'd eat like 6 grilled chicken breasts. So it was never that I was eating like bad things. I just ate a lot. Like, and even still, like I'm like a never ending like garbage disposal. Like I can just eat all day long and never be full.
Yes.
But I was wrestling like 155 in college and I wasn't really cutting. And then even on the senior level, once I was just competing there, I was wrestling like 75 kilos for a while. Like, but I also used to lift really heavy too. Like when I was 75 kilos, I was strong 75 kilos.
Yeah.
But as I started getting a little bit older, I have some injuries. I need surgery on both my shoulders right now. So one, I couldn't lift the way I used to be able to lift in order to be competitive at those upper weights. But also, the strongest part of a girl is our hips. And the weakest part of a girl is our upper body. So trying to fight the hips of a 75-kilo girl with 2 torn labrums and a torn bicep didn't really work that well anymore. So I was like, I need to make a change here. And also from a standpoint of, like, again, older athlete, I don't recover as well as I used to. I'm like, I need to start cleaning up my diet and actually getting on track here, and be more proactive how I'm eating and how I'm recovering. So it was 2017 going into 2018. I went from 75 kilos down to 65 kilos. And that year I ended up actually winning my first US Open. And I'm like, this wasn't an accident. You know what I mean? And again, it wasn't just like, oh, I was at a lighter weight class, so I was bigger. It's that my diet and nutrition was all in alignment with how I want to be performing and competing. You know, I knew my cut was a little bit more, but it wasn't like I was like cutting 15 pounds. It was like a 6-week descent. So my weight was smarter. I was stronger at that weight. I wasn't wrestling as big of girls trying to fight, you know, their hips and everything. More than anything else, I was just able to train a little bit harder because I was like, eating a little bit smarter. So again, it was, I think, important for my girls to see that too, that, you know, we talk again, like, we're not a big weight cutting team anyway, but it's always like, if you want to go down a weight class, that's a discussion. And we're figuring out how we're going to do it the right way and the smart way. And right now they have to watch me do that as well. I mean, it's not just me, like, you know, spewing stuff out at them and hoping that they absorb some of it. They're watching me do it.
Yeah.
And they have a visual, you know. It's funny, whenever I eat in the cafeteria, every day I walk past the desserts, and our wrestling team sits at the very first table when you walk out of the food area. They have, since my recruiting trip in 2010, that's where the wrestlers have sat, closest to the food, because of course. So every day when I finish my lunch, I go and I always just look at the desserts. I never take one. I just need to like look. And then there's a fruit basket right next to it. And then I always like look at the cookies, grab a banana and leave. And I'll always like turn around and walk back into the dining area, and I'll see them all with their phones out, like trying to catch me getting a dessert. And then when I grab the banana, they're like they're waiting for the day that I break. So but it's important, you know, and I did that anyway, grab a banana, but now I'm really, really hyper aware of making sure that I'm only grabbing a banana or an apple and not, you know, the homemade whoopie pie from our awesome lady in the dining hall that makes them every morning. So, and the other thing is, like, I kind of switched over to a more plant-based diet. And not that I'm super preachy, like everyone should watch Game Changers and do all this, but it's a decision I kind of did on my own. I started doing some, you know, not just watching documentaries, but doing some independent research and stuff. And I still eat fish like once a week, especially with how much I travel. It's a little bit easier. If we're on the road, I can get salmon or something. But everything I make at home is almost 100% vegan. If I'm in the dining hall or something, like, and I have like an omelet for something, I'll eat some eggs here and there. Like I said, I'll eat fish once a week, but my diet is overwhelmingly plant-based, which I feel like has helped me a lot too. You know, I don't think it's right for everyone, but I've noticed I recovered faster, my cardio got better, and I've just enjoyed eating that way, and I think I'll continue to even after I'm done competing. So again, it's being a lot more intentional about my diet, nutrition, recovery, all of that. And I wish I'd done it a lot sooner, because I think I maybe would have had a less painful ending to my wrestling career over the past couple of years. I figured that out a little bit sooner. So I kind of taught to my athletes, I'm like, I'm not just telling you this because I think it's important. I'm telling you this because I can look back retroactively and wish I would have done that a little bit differently. So I think some of them here, I think some of them it goes in one ear and right out the other, but if they even like glean or absorb one little thing from me, I think that's a win. So
I think that there's been a big transition in the somewhat recent recent past for teams not so focused on weight cutting being the only vehicle for competition, and that there are ways that you can either kind of slowly work into the weight that you're trying to be at a lower weight class or strategically, but that now it's more of an alignment with where your body would be at peak condition, and then from there being strategic and saying, you know, let's look at the weight class, let's look at the brackets, let's see where it's stacked coming up this year and what's going to be best for you. But I feel like there is still a perception that the wrestling community and the weight cutting process is going to lead to like renal failure, that it's organ failure, it's guys being locked in saunas. You know, they don't even think about women when they think about weight cutting, you know, the weight cutting or the wrestling community at large. But I think that there's been a big transition, you know, into safer ways of losing weight, ways where you're getting involved with nutritional coaches and stuff like that. So
yeah, absolutely. And especially these past 2 years. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't cut you off.
You're good. So so go ahead. So these past few years.
I was gonna say, you know, I was mentioning I went down to 65 kilos back in 2018. And then the following year was what should have been the Olympic year, right? Going 2019, that US Open that year, that December, going into 2020. And like I was like, well, I'm not gonna go back up to 68. Like I'm again, like I my whole purpose for going down was that I can't wrestle bigger girls. So I was like, this is an added step. This is some added discipline. It's no longer just like, well, 6 weeks out, I need to make a change. It became like 6 months out, I need to make a change. But again, like, it was not like, let me just crash diet. It was like, how do I do this properly? And I think the more that we're learning and doing all of this nutritional research and all this stuff, I mean, not just with wrestling, but with MMA and everything, like, there is kind of this shift happening in a good way. We're still going to see these bad weight cutting habits. I don't think it's going to change anytime soon, but I think people are being a little bit more proactive about knowing what they're doing and knowing what they're doing to their bodies. And it's good. It's a good thing for sure, but it's still a long way to go.
Yeah. I mean, I know, like, I come from predominantly a running background, and as you hit around your sophomore year of high school and your hips start to widen and your body starts to just kind of naturally want to hold on to a little bit more weight, you
Mhm.
see girls who are very seriously trying to make it into a D1 program, who are doing what they can to stay thin at all costs. And there wasn't that nutrition component put into it, or this weight training component put into it, and it was girls who were 16, 17 years old who were no longer getting their periods, and realizing then that maybe
Mhm.
something was wrong. So to see the wrestling community itself really start to change the way that we are looking at weight loss and how to do it safely, it's so important, I think, not just for the women in the sport, but also just women in sports in general.
Mhm. Yeah, without a doubt. I think, I mean, you mentioned running. I mean, you could women's gymnastics and volleyball, even some of the other emerging sports, acrobatics and tumbling. I mean, we're hearing so much more about body dysmorphia, and it's
Yeah.
not like it's a new thing. It's just we're finally to a point where we're willing to talk about it, and that our athletes are willing to talk about it, and that coaches are willing to be receptive to them talking about it,
Mhm.
and not just like, oh, well, yeah, but, one coach is not promoting that by saying, well, you need to get down a new weight class, or you need to be lighter because you're a flyer, like all, in cheerleading and everything. Um, we're kind of starting to have those conversations and open the dialogue up a little bit.
Yeah.
And that's so important, that it's no longer this, it's like with all the mental health stuff happening right now. It's no longer, there's not the stigma around it anymore. We're acknowledging that it's a problem as much as we don't want to, and as much as it might be a little bit ugly sometimes. But again, and like, that's the only way we can make progress. We have to make ourselves a little bit uncomfortable to make progress. And that's something I always talk to my athletes about. I'm like, this is a sport, and this is supposed to be fun, and we're supposed to be enjoying it. If we're ever to a point where how we feel about our bodies and how we feel about weight cutting and our enjoyment of the sport isn't fun, and it becomes stressful. Yeah, I mean, like, it's gonna be a little bit stressful. We're competing in a national tournament. It's gonna be a little bit stressful. There are gonna be moments of stress, but it shouldn't be all consuming. And if you ever get to that point, like, let's talk about it and figure out where it's coming from, so this doesn't lead to issues not only now but down in the future when you're 25 and 30 and 40 years old, that these issues are still, you're kind of carrying them with you. Let's create healthy habits now, both our eating habits, our mental habits, how we're talking to ourselves,
Yeah.
and making sure that we're reinforcing good habits, not bad ones. So again, like, is there progress? Yes. Is there more work to be done? Yes. But compared to where we're at 5, 10, 15 years ago, I mean, it's a much healthier environment in that space, I think.
Yeah, definitely. So talk to me a little bit about, like, I'm going to kind of jump into like recruiting some, because now I'm thinking of you building good relationships with recruits and everything. So talk to me a little bit about the college recruiting process, what it's like for you, things that you look for your athletes when you're out there recruiting. Do you mostly go to freestyle events? Do you also find yourself going to folk style events, especially for the wrestlers who are competing on their high school team?
So I think, I mean, naturally, the biggest events we recruit at are the major national tournaments.
Hmm.
And most of those big ones are freestyle. You'll get Fargo, looking at cadet and junior world team trials. In more recent years, Super 32 has become a pretty big event. So all of those events, for the most part, are freestyle. There still is a folk style national championship out in Oklahoma. But the events that we're going to, just where the sheer numbers are freestyle events. That being said, I think that it's still important to look at those folk style results. Because at the end of the day, wrestling is wrestling. Like, yes, we're wrestling freestyle in college. So it is helpful to have that background and to have that skill set, but a double leg is a double leg, a half is a half, a sprawl is a sprawl. It's not going to prevent a girl, and it's not going to prevent me from recruiting a girl if they've only wrestled folk style, or if they have limited freestyle experience or anything like that. Helpful, yes. Imperative to collegiate success? Absolutely not. I mean, one of the best wrestlers in the history of our program, Jessie Key, 4-time All-American at 4 different weight classes, never wrestled freestyle a day in her life. Ended up being a 2-time national runner-up, lost to Jakara Winchester by a point as a freshman, and was in on a leg when the clock ran out, and like she was gonna score. I mean, Jessie was freaking good, man. It never wrestled like a freestyle. So I think when I'm looking at recruiting, obviously we're going to see the big names first. So, your Fargo champs, your cadet world team members, all that. I mean, as with any collegiate program, but for me, like, it's not like that's where it ends. I dig, even before I was a coach, I dug through results. Like I'm a nerd, I'm a wrestling nerd. Anyone that knows me knows that I'm like, it's almost like weird. Like I'm a little bit weird with it, but, I'll look at different states' high school results, and I'll look at boys regional tournaments to see if there's any girls competing, and we'll try to find some film on them and dig that up. And so like, I can only speak for myself. I'm looking everywhere. But I think the biggest thing I would tell any recruit is like, get as much exposure as you can. And I know that, everyone's financial situation is different. And everyone's,
Right.
You have kids that are 3-sport athletes. And I'm a big proponent of not believing in sport specialization. I was a 3-sport athlete in high school. But I mean, the best way to get recruited is to put yourself out there and get your name out there. I mean, there's kids that have just been around forever, competing in everything. And that sticks out to me too. I mean, even if they're not winning every single tournament, the fact that they want to compete and they want to put themselves out there and they're not afraid to challenge themselves and to see where they stack up, to me says a lot about their character, which is sometimes just as important. I mean, some of our best girls are ones that never won a national title, so they were still hungry. I've seen girls come into collegiate programs that were 3-time national champions, and all of a sudden they got into a room, and not only were they not the best girl in the country anymore, they weren't even the best kid in the room, and it kind of defeated them a little bit mentally.
Yeah.
Whereas that kid that was like always 3rd, 4th, 5th, like they're used to not being the best, so they still have that little bit of a chip on their shoulder, and they're still hungry, and they still are constantly trying to improve because they haven't gotten there yet, but they want to be. Sometimes it's a kid like that stands out, that's taken 3rd at every tournament in the country, and I'm like, I want this kid because this kid isn't afraid to put themselves out there. They're not afraid to compete. And they're still, they have that hunger. So, I mean, there's so many collegiate programs right now. If there's a girl that wants to wrestle in college, there's a roster spot for you somewhere. I mean, it's not, the opportunity is there without a doubt. That's one thing that is absolutely for sure, is there is a spot in college for every single female high school wrestler right now. And if you're not getting recruited, start reaching out. There might be a coach that hasn't discovered you yet. Start sending out emails. Every program has that recruit me form on their athletics website. Put your name out there. I promise you someone's going to call you back, if not 5 or 6 or 7 different programs. These schools need to build their rosters right now with all these new programs popping up. So don't be afraid to put yourself out there. Have some a little bit of autonomy, have some agency, and reach out, and you'll get a response.
Yeah. Now, how do you balance? I love this because normally if somebody's going to ask a balance question to a woman, it's going to be something about work and their personal life. We're going to assume that women are capable of doing that by this point in the world. So how do you balance training and coaching? How do you handle that?
Well, I have a giant wall calendar over there. That's about 4 feet by 4 feet. So that's number one. I have one in my apartment. I have one in my office as well. They're identical. My Outlook calendar on my phone is pretty imperative. And setting tons and anyone that knows me or has been around me for more than like 3 hours ever knows that I have alarms going off on my phone all day long, and they're super obnoxious, and I hit snooze a million times, but it's like, I need those constant reminders to get things done, because I mean, I have a lot on my plate. I mean, there's no other way around it. I've had personal relationships that have suffered as a result, to be entirely honest. And my mom gets mad at me probably like at least once a week because I don't call her back. So I mean, that's the reality of it. But I've kind of chosen it, and I wouldn't say I'm okay with it, but I've accepted that these are things that I want to be doing. And it sounds so cliche, but people say if it's something you enjoy doing, it's not really work. And that's how I feel. I enjoy coaching. I enjoy the work I do with Wrestle Like a Girl. I enjoy doing jujitsu. I enjoy working at a brewery a couple nights a week, because it's just, I don't feel like I'm overwhelming myself and I'm miserable, because I'm not. I'm actually very happy. It just so happens that I'm getting my happiness from, working my butt off all the time. But I think that's actually kind of how I kind of operate at my best sometimes. I kind of thrive in chaos. And I feel like if I slow down for too long, I almost get lazy. I do much better when it's go, 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 because I'm constantly in that mindset of being productive. If I have a moment to relax, I kind of get into like I already took a nap today. Like, I guess I can just watch one more episode of Netflix. The next thing I know, I'm like way behind. So I actually prefer to kind of stay busy and keep it going and keep getting things done and keep the train rolling. So, it's again, I have to be very intentional about keeping myself organized with my alarms and my calendars and all that. But as long as I stay on top of it, I have good time management. I get 8 hours of sleep. I would go to bed at 10. I wake up at 6, and I'm productive from the time I wake up until the time I go to bed. And I have to prioritize really well too. I mean, there's times where I had to set a Zoom call instead of training that day, or vice versa. There's times I had to put something off, plans with a friend because I had to get on the mat. If it was at 8 p.m., it was at 8 p.m.
Right.
So I think I'm just willing to make those sacrifices, and that's something that I was okay with doing. I didn't feel like I was missing out on anything. It was just kind of like, this is where I'm at. But I'm it's kind of fun in a way too, though, is because people are always kind of like, this sounds like super, super conceited. People are always amazed at how much I get done in a day. And I'm like,
Yeah.
that's just how I operate. And it's kind of how I've always been. So, I mean, I'd love to get it to a point where I'm not doing so much. Right now I'm 28 years old and I don't really have anything else to do besides be selfish and do the things that I want to do. But I love to be able to calm down a little bit and have, one job instead of three, or, only compete in one sport instead of wrestling and jujitsu. But
Right.
right now I like what I do, and I'm making it work. And I've been making it work for a couple of years now. So I'm just going to keep the train rolling.
Yeah. I think with the like I've seen it with my husband, the birth of social media and the role that it plays in the recruiting process now, it's almost impossible to really turn yourself completely off and say, I'm not going to watch this tournament that's going to be starting at 8 p.m. our time, that's going to be on Flow, or it's going to be on Track Wrestling. Like, there are always things that you could be reading up on. The pound for pound releases are coming out and you're seeing rankings, and they're the it's so great because the accessibility to watch wrestling and to follow wrestling is in a place that it obviously has never ever been before. But I think that there is also, with that, there's this it makes it difficult to put up the wall and say, this is where I need to stop for now and I need to focus on other things. But like you're saying, when you have your priorities set and you're willing to own and make certain sacrifices, like, it is what it is. You're doing it in the moment, you're doing what you think is best for you or best for your team, and it's hard. It's a double-edged sword.
Yeah, for sure. And something like I've kind of like trying to actively work on recently is having boundaries. Like I said, like I if I get a call, like I said, like I wake up every day at 6 a.m. I go to bed at 10. That's my day. But sometimes I'll get a text from Recruit in California at 10:15. I'll be like, oh, gotta get back to him right now. And I'm like, I need to get over. I'm like, it's okay. They're not gonna not come to King because I didn't text them back within 3 minutes. If I text them back in the morning, I'm sure they're gonna understand. Or my phone goes off and I get an email at 11 p.m. from someone on the West Coast, and I feel like I need to respond right away. Or I'll be out to dinner. I'll have a time where I do get to go out to dinner with a friend, and I get a phone call, and I'm like, I gotta take this real quick. Like, those are the kinds of things that I've really been trying to work on. I don't mind being busy. I don't mind doing the work. Being kind of present, I think, is important too, and again, if I'm with a friend or if I'm with my family or whoever, being able to kind of prioritize that in that moment and not being afraid to say like, hey, I'll get back to you in a minute. Hey, sorry, I'm out to dinner with a friend. I'll get back to you in a minute. So I think that is the one thing that I am trying to do a better job of, is having those boundaries, even with my athletes. Like, they'll text me sometimes at 11 o'clock at night, like, hey, can we do a one-on-one at 9 tomorrow? And I'm like, okay, sure. Like, you got it. Rather than being like, you guys know I'm sleeping, stop it, which is what I want to say.
Right.
But again, like, I think I just, it's a conversation I had with Terry Steiner recently. One of my national team meetings back at Captain's Cup in February.
Mhm.
He told me, he's like, I think sometimes you're a little bit too selfless. And it sounds like such a weird thing to say in a negative light, like, you're too selfless. And at the time I was like, what is he talking about? And then I'm like, man, he was spot on. And he wasn't just talking about wrestling. Like, he was talking about everything. Like,
Yeah.
it's okay to be a little bit selfish sometimes, and it's important. So that's a work in progress. On my goals for, the rest of this year, the things I want to do a better job of, I think creating better boundaries and stronger boundaries is definitely one of them.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, like you were talking about all these different ways that you model things for your athletes with your choices when it comes to nutrition, or, that tenacity in the room and everything. And that it's so important to also model, it kind of goes back to the mental health component and modeling what it means to make sure that you are maintaining a balance, that you won't burn out or you won't give so much of yourself that there's nothing left at the end of the day for you.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think kind of sometimes like I said, like I train jujitsu. I think part of that isn't like that doesn't feel like a chore. It's like that's my break, to
Yeah.
be in a different headspace and to kind of just like zone out for an hour and a half. So yeah, I'm still training, or you can call it whatever you want, but to me, that is kind of that moment, where one jujitsu is like a little bit cathartic inherently.
Yeah.
But it's also that is my me time. I mean, sometimes training for wrestling and that hour 2 hours a day is my me time, um and that is prevents me from burning out sometimes. And again, like I mentioned, I work at a brewery. Like to me, that's just fun. Like that's not
Yeah.
work. It's just like, I know these two guys, they used to wrestle for the same head coach that I did. Like it's fun. So finding ways to be productive and having fun with it. But again, like I don't know if I can do this for another 10, 15, 20 years. I mean, I don't want to burn out. I don't want to get out. I don't want to get to the point where I'm actively in the moment thinking I'm burnt out. I want to be
Right.
able to recognize early on, like if I keep doing this, I'm going to burn out, and being able to make a change. So, I haven't seen any red flags yet, but it's definitely something that I try to stay aware of, and try to look out for, and being able to again take that day and be like, I'm turning my phone off today, and like just gonna go hide, or like go to the lake or something, and having those days once in a while. But again, like I'm trying to be aware. You know what I mean? I preach it to my athletes. So again, I gotta, talk the talk and walk the walk. So
Yeah.
definitely working on that.
What are some
Mm.
ways that you do like team building with your own athletes and you kind of create that atmosphere that goes beyond the mat?
So I think, I mean, we do a lot of team events. I mean, every team does. Every year at the end of our preseason week, we take them to play paintball. We cook out T-bone steaks and
Ooh.
stuff, play cornhole and all that. That's always one of the big events. We actually just had our team end of the year. We had our school-wide athletic banquet tonight,
Mhm.
but we had our teams like end of the year awards, like a cookout last weekend over at the lake. So I mean, little things like that. But I think Coach Mormon and I both, again, try to be really intentional about getting the team all on the same page.
Yeah.
Wrestling might be an individual sport, but having team camaraderie, especially in a sport that does require as much discipline as wrestling, is so important. I think a really good example, a couple of years ago, we had a really, really big freshman class, to the point where we were almost evenly returners and freshmen. I think we had like 16 returners and like 16 freshmen or something like that.
Mhm.
And we noticed kind of early on that they weren't really meshing. Not that they weren't getting along. It wasn't like there was drama, but like they just weren't integrating yet. Obviously, all
Yeah.
the returners knew each other. All the freshmen were still kind of getting to know each other. So that's who they were hanging out with, which was fine. I mean, again, there wasn't like, points of
Yeah.
contention, but we're like, we need to get everyone on the same page. Like, what can we do to get them all together? So we had actually seen a video, or Coach Mormon saw a video, I think it was of UNC women's soccer. And what they did and what we ended up doing, is we told them like, hey, it's the beginning of the year. We're gonna have a long season. You're gonna have to watch our weight, all this stuff. So we're
Mhm.
gonna get you guys pizza. Let's meet in the Hall of Fame. We're gonna get you guys a whole bunch of pizzas, whatever you guys want. We're just gonna hang out, whatever. And they're like, what's the trick? Like you're gonna get
Uh-huh.
us pizza, really? Like, yep, huh? Don't worry about it. Like it's not a trick. Just come eat some pizza. Um, and we arranged all the tables in the room in like a big circle. And what we did is we lined them up: freshman returner, freshman returner, freshman returner. And then we tied all of their hands together to the person to the left and to the right. So all of our returners were tied to two freshmen, all of our freshmen were tied to two returners.
Okay.
And the rule was that you had to eat your pizza or your water or whatever with both hands at the same time. So in order for you to eat your pizza or drink your water or whatever, you had to work and communicate with people on either side of you.
Yeah.
And by default, the people to the left of them and to the right, so essentially the whole circle, the whole table circle, was all having to work together. And by the end of that exercise, like the whole team was on the same page. And once we fix the problem, we're like, okay, cool, we're one team now. It's no longer freshman returners. It is like, this is King Women's Wrestling.
Yeah.
But again, it wasn't just us like waiting for it to work itself out. It's like, well, we're going to step in here and meddle and put you guys all on the same page. So that's
Yeah.
what we did. So I think just Coach Harm and I, yes, the X's and O's of coaching wrestling are important, but it's all that off the mat stuff too that I think really helps you be successful. We are, I think our program's accolades speak for themselves. I mean, 123 All-Americans, 21 national champions, 2 Olympians now that
Yeah.
Sarah made the team. So I just think we're doing a lot of things right. I think it helps too that I wrestled for Coach Mormon. So a lot of the things that I know are the same things that he's taught me. So there's never like any like dissonance between us. We're always on the same page, but he's also receptive to things. If I'm mad and learn something new, he's willing to get that out too. So it's not like the whole like academic inbreeding concept where we're too similar. There's still new ideas being brought in, but the girls aren't ever going to see us butting heads because, I wrestled for him. You know what I mean? He's been my mentor and my coach for, a decade now, which I think just kind of helps us stay cohesive and helps us, maintain a strong program culture for sure.
Yeah, I think that that's where we're going to start seeing things happen now at the collegiate level is within women's programs is starting to see these types of legacies and reciprocal wrestling relationships where you go from athlete to coach, or recruit to athlete to coach and everything. That's where we're headed next with women's wrestling, because now we've got women, especially the women that are in your group, of standout women, this group that you are a part of. I think that when people like lump you in, and we think of the group of women, I think that something that's so important is that eventually or soon, we're going to start to see that these women are going to kind of finish up their runs at the Olympics eventually. And it's going to come full circle, and we're going to find them back coaching in corners at collegiate levels, at schools that they coached at, or they're going to get brought on to RTCs as coaches where they've trained as well. And I think that that's so exciting that we're going to start seeing these types of legacies that we tend to assign to men's wrestling teams at the collegiate level. And we're going to start seeing it with women as well. I think that you are a great testimony to that. Definitely.
Yeah, that's definitely my hope. I mean, that we're going to have girls start making that transition. And again, like I was talking about earlier, to consider it a viable option to transition into it. It's not just like, well, I guess I'll coach because I don't know what else to do right now. And it makes sense, but because like these girls are excited about coaching, excited about giving back and creating legacy on the sport that's a little bit different than what they did as an athlete. I think that's important to me, is that like I had a pretty successful senior level career. I wasn't a world beater. I wanted some things here and there for sure. But I kind of realized that the impact that I can have on wrestling goes so far beyond what I can do as an athlete. As a coach and an advocate, I can impact so many more lives. And hopefully those girls will take what I taught to them and go impact more lives. I mean, I think that's how I can be the most impactful, is right now as a coach and as an advocate. As an athlete, you can only do so much. I mean, it's helpful, yes, and it's important, absolutely, 100%. But if all of us as athletes decide to keep giving back a little bit more, if it's as an official, if it's a coach, if it's the team mom, those are the things that are going to define your legacy on the sport, at least in my opinion. So I'm just, that kind of like makes my heart happy a little bit to know that I am making an impact, that hopefully that the girls that I'm impacting will go on to impact others, and some of my national team teammates and some of our other senior level girls and college girls will continue to do the same. And that's how the sport's going to continue to grow even more than it already is.
Yeah. I know that you have a recruiting call after this. And I was just saying to my husband the other night, cause he talked to a kid, and I said, hey, is this your first time talking to that recruit? And he said, yeah. And I was like, you make literally hundreds of these phone calls, thousands of these phone calls, right? For you, it's not that every recruit's not special, but it is still just part of the process. It's the wheel that turns and you're used to it. But if you step back and think, there are kids who are going to pick up the phone and you're going to be on the other end and you're going to say, hi, this is Coach Salata from King. And they're going to get off the phone with you and they're going to be like, Mom, guess who just called me? And they're going to be so blown away by the fact that they got a call from you, that they have watched you compete, they have followed your career, and now they're getting a call from you. And it's amazing, the impact that I mean, I can only imagine the impact that you're having just when the kid picks up that phone and it's you on the other
end. Yeah. And I've had that happen sometimes too. And it's always like kind of weird because I'm like, I'm really not that cool. If only this kid knew that, I'm just a weirdo sitting in my apartment at 9:00 at night, like drinking my green juice and like my apartment's a mess. I'm like, again, like not like getting full of myself, but I've had kids like, oh, thanks so much for calling me. I really enjoyed watching you wrestle. We watched your Olympic trials last weekend. And I'm like sitting here, like feet up on my couch, like having this conversation with this kid. And like you said, like, you almost sound like a broken record. Back when I had roommates, they used to laugh at me. They would like mock me as I was making recruiting calls because they knew what I was going to say next. And like, I'm like, stop it. Like, you can only make so many organic phone calls. Like you said, I call hundreds of kids a year. And you have the same talking points, and you tailor the phone call to the kid based on where they're from and what their goals are and all At the end of the day, I'm selling King Wrestling, and I'm always going to sell it the same way. It's a program that I came from and a program that I believe in. And I hope that, you know, they know me as Julia Salata, who wrestled at King University. And there's a reason I came back here, and there's a reason I continue to coach here. But you know, but if that's what gets a kid to King, that they wanted to talk to Julia Salata on the phone for an hour, then I'll take it. I'm never going to be mad about it either.
That's fantastic. That's awesome. Well, all right. Well, Julia, here, I'm going to let you go so you can go ahead and go make your recruiting calls with your feet up. Relax for a little bit. I know you've had a busy day, but thank you so much for taking the time out to talk. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Oh, yeah. All right. Well, take care.
Thank you.
Bye.